Well, happy Mother's Day everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Since it's Mother's Day, and since Nintendo recently decided to re-release their cult classics Mother 1 and 2, known as EarthBound and EarthBound Beginnings to Nintendo Switch Online, I'm finally ready to lay out a theory of mine about the nature of the series' antagonist. My theory has gone through several iterations now, only to become the mother of all theories. No pun intended. Ahem. Well, let's get started. So how to introduce the series? I'm certain today Mother is a series that needs no introduction, but I know it wasn't always that way. EarthBound was rather rare and obscure back in the mid-90s. I remember first renting it from a Blockbuster after hearing it was an RPG from a store clerk. Not expecting much due to its odd modern setting, it has since become straight up one of my favorite games of all time. Being one of the few kids in my friend groups who really enjoyed RPGs, I got to have some fun briefly spreading rumors about a strange parody RPG taking place in a modern world rather than the typical fantasy world games like Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy took place in. Soon the schoolyard was abuzz about a weird Super Nintendo game where you were a 13-year-old kid who battled everything from hippies to cult members, piles of vomit, and even used ATMs. Your account balance generously replenished by your caring father.
Hello, sir. This is the United Bank of Money.
But I won't bore you too much with my personal history of the games. We'll get right into the theory I'm going to lay out about Porky Minch. And yes, I know many have done theories on this character already, such as press start and B squared to name a few, but I have a fascinating theory of my own, so fasten your seatbelts. My idea for this theory began innocently enough, well perhaps not so innocently enough, with the mystery surrounding the final boss and what might be going on with Porky. As we know, Ness and his party must first warp to the past courtesy of Dr. Andonut's, Apple Kid, and the Mr. Saturns. The only problem being the Phase Distorter Mark III cannot transport lifeforms. But luckily, Andonut's is able to transfer the party member's consciousness to robots and send you back into the cave of the past. Trouble is that when you meet Ness's old childhood friend Porky, though appearing with a healthy shade of grey, appears to have not been roboticized before returning to the past. The thing is, I've never been convinced over the years of the explanations I've heard of why Porky is like that at this stage of the game. These include Porky dying and becoming a zombie, he's not really grey and it's merely the tint of the glass he's behind, or even Gygus teaching him how to time travel without the need to become a robot at all with his superior alien technology. I eventually thought of one myself no one considered. Perhaps Porky actually was a robot all along? Maybe he was just a more sophisticated looking robot that shares his likeness far greater than the last minute makeshift robots Andonut's and the Apple Kid made. It would at least indicate some more advanced planning on the part of Porky, or whoever made this robot. Kind of intriguing. We know from Mother 3 robots that share a greater likeness to Porky are certainly possible, but we also know from this game that the corporeal Porky did in fact travel through time with severe physical aging consequences. But he's never seen again with the grey color though. So what gives? Perhaps this means another of the main theories out there about this change in color is correct. People under Gygus or Gigas' mind control often turn bluish. This could also have happened to Porky briefly since his color would have changed back upon the defeat of Gygus, right? A few problems arise pretty quickly. Overworld sprites usually show this color change, while the ones in battle often don't. This is actually reversed with Porky in the Cave of the Past. And besides, everyone knows Porky first came under the control of Gygus much earlier in the game, right? Well, it was here when I really began to fall down a rabbit hole. Because upon my next playthrough of EarthBound, and from really studying the plot elements related to Porky's relationship to Gygus, I feel I've become convinced that the official story that most people still believe to this day, meaning Porky was in fact manipulated by Gygus into becoming his evil henchman, is completely false, and in fact it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. The first thing I'll note is that many claim the WatanoLemonT statue first corrupted Porky. But when paying attention to details, that is quite simply not the case. We know that after Ness frees Paula and defeats Carpainter, that literally everyone in the cult except Porky ceases being hostile towards Ness. Yes, I know in the English version he's simply portrayed as a liar pretending to want to be friends with Ness. It's relatively common for the Minches to lie. But in the original, he appears to actually want to be friends, but Ness spurns him at this point. I still have a different interpretation, however. Is it possible that Porky here genuinely thought he and Ness could go back to being friends? Or could it be that Ness's burgeoning new telepathic powers allowed him to sense for the first time that something was seriously off about Porky, hence his cold shoulder reaction? Just to double down on this, once again, even after the statue is smashed to pieces by Ness and Jeff in Foresight and ceases being a threat at all, though now in a fighting retreat within the Monotoli building, Porky remains as hostile as ever. This all started looking so bizarre to me. Even though it's clear the WatanoLemonT statue was not actually brainwashing Porky, literally every time in the game Porky actively confronts Ness, the WatanoLemonT statue is never too far away, with perhaps the one and only exception being in the Cave of the Past. Or is it? Well, more on that later, because I'm set to change the way you may think about that infamous final boss forever. It was at this point that I began to think heavily about the event in Foresight just before you defeat the evil WatanoLemonT. The 4 squares on the city, the 4 colors red, green, blue, and yellow we see, the fact that the moon has 4 primary phases, the 4th floor of the office. I don't need to get into it, but for EarthBound's Japanese creator, Shigesato Itoi, making the number 4 so prominent in this area all but has to have some serious significance. With no Fiveville to speak of, this is the final city of Eagle Land, and seems to mark a new journey in many ways, much like the moon's phases. Porky will never again directly challenge Ness, and we only see him again when Ness pursues him to the final boss. I couldn't shake the thought of it, but is it maybe possible that right here in Foresight, Ness and Jeff actually killed the real Gygus? It is through the statue that Gygus is said to be spreading his evil influence, but could his actual soul be contained within it? We all know souls can definitely travel within machines in this game, hence how you travel back to the past. I mean, if we want to get technical, they can even travel on their own with the party after someone has died. And heck, all you need to do is go to the hospital and you'll be back alive again, and ready for a new adventure in true Kenny fashion. But getting back to our friend Porky Minch. As I've said, nothing really adds up about this character's actions. He seems to be a rather cowardly boy in the beginning. He goes from a total non-adventurer and progresses all the way to becoming Dr. Wily levels of evil genius in late game Mother 3. Feeling confident, Porky was not manipulated by Gygus at virtually any point, and he alone chose his actions. It was at this point that I wanted to start drilling down on where Gygus could be during the events of EarthBound in the 1990s. After all, although Porky was not being manipulated, other creatures and humans definitely were being manipulated by Gygus at various points of the game. All these years later, Gygus' whereabouts still seem to be the most mysterious aspect to anything in EarthBound. In Mother 1, he was definitively revealed to be leading the alien invasion in the 1980s at the start of the game through to the end. But in EarthBound, well, we know from BuzzBuzz he destroyed everything 10 years in the future. We do encounter him, but only after we travel back an unspecified number of years in the past to take him on as the final boss. We get some vague references to his possible whereabouts in the present day, but never make contact. Maybe it was time to play through and study his major operations more closely. Despite him apparently not being around when Starman Jr. follows BuzzBuzz back to the past, he is still able to instruct his best minions to occupy the Your Sanctuary locations, to stop Ness from acquiring the 8 melodies he needs to power himself up, shatter the Soundstone and fulfill the prophecy. So, the first major episode of a large-scale manipulation of people to analyze would undoubtedly be the Happiest cult. Gygus has apparently gone through Tucson, brainwashing people to start a cult in which its members obsessively color everything blue in an effort to feel happy and dominate the struggle of the colors, I guess. When I think about this now, this is actually a rather bizarre thing for an all-powerful cosmic destroyer to do, isn't it? Why would Gygus have such a comically innocent impression of what a cult is? I mean, think about yourself as a child, and what your first impression of some type of very dark material was like. In this instance, a cult. What would your initial thoughts be on what it could all be about, keeping in mind you're still very innocent about the world? Well, maybe you would notice the common uniforms or perhaps the color its leaders wear, and think in your innocent mind, well, maybe that's what they're all about. Painting over everyone else's favorite color with their own. Taking this into account, it starts to look like someone with a far more childish and innocent mind than a destructive cosmic entity is actually behind the Happy Happy Village incident. Unless this entity itself is somehow not what we're led to believe. Next we have the Master Belch saga, where you faced off against his zombie army in Threed. Nothing a little zombie paper can't do the trick to clear the way.
Wait. Pretty girl paper? You don't see any pretty zombie girls in this tent? I must be seeing things.
Anyway, we're actually led to believe at this stage by Belch himself after defeating him that Gygas may be present in the area, since he mentions that he got the Mani Mani statue into Forside. It's really strange how he knows about the statue in the first place. Did Gygas somehow intervene himself and take it into Forside? This is odd, since later we know it was actually Everdred who stole it back from Carpainter before trying to sell it in the city. He also says WatanoLemonT tricked him, but things really don't add up here, do they? Belch already knew it was called Mani Mani before it got to the city, and I find it hard to believe WatanoLemonT managed to trick him on his own. Was he being manipulated by the statue itself? Were they both being manipulated at the same time? Another option, of course, was that Porky could have arranged all this. But it was my analysis of Moonside next that really got me thinking. Until now, apparently Gygas had not been powerful enough to actually entrance Ness himself through the statue. Again, odd, but here we are. Now I know this will sound strange, and I'm not sure if someone's noticed this before, but despite the fact this is supposed to be Gygas who created this illusion through the statue, there are actually a lot of odd references and callbacks to either things Porky has said or facts about him. When speaking here, you must remember yes means no and no means yes. This could also be a hint towards Porky as well, since he lies commonly. I'm not sure about the infamous Invisible Man or what his gold tooth and connected eyebrows mean, but he does stay out of your battles, and the only other character in the game who joins you temporarily but does not battle is, of course, Porky. It was at this point that I remembered some old theories on Gygas back in the day that drew some more inspiration. One in particular was a variant upon the common theory that Ness's party travels back in time to abort Gygas as a fetus before he can be born. One that I know Mr. Itoi particularly doesn't like. And I personally don't like as well for reasons I'll explain. But the variant on this theory was that you were not actually aborting a fetus, but rather the fetus was Ness, and you were preventing Gygas from attaching and reincarnating into him. Meaning that at its core, Gygas was actually possessing Ness this entire time. From what I remember, it was James Rolfe who popularized this theory in his Angry Video Game Nerd episode about EarthBound. A theory I also have a hard time believing since there are maybe only a few select clues, the Ness's Nightmare battle being a solid hint. Since the Mani Mani statue returns deep within Ness's subconscious, sporting Ness's wider move pool, including even his signature move, Sai Rockin'. The problem I have always had with this theory is the basic reason that Ness and his party had no idea where they were going at this point in the game. In fact, if you were either aborting Gygas or performing an exorcism on Ness, then why did the villain actually lead Ness's party to the exact spot in time where they could do the most damage? But on the other hand, I actually do believe the part of James' theory that Gygas is a reincarnating entity forever destroying the universe and coming back in a new one. But I would actually expand this to include all of the main characters in tandem with this theory. We get some very good evidence of all this in the series as well. From both the Pyramid Riddle and the Talking Stone from the Lost World Below the Earth, not to mention Letter in Mother 3, who more or less confirms that the universe within the Mother games has been remade multiple times. By the way, I just love this guy. Who would have thought this strange silent character from Chapter 1 would give us some of the juiciest lore of the entire series, right in the final chapter? Thanks, you deserve a slightly unclean cookie. So, it was then that I thought, hey, what if I were to tweak this theory a little? What if instead of Ness, it was actually Porky who was Gygas' reincarnation all along? I mean, when you think about it, you can easily see possible reincarnations for most of the important characters of Mother 1 and 2. I mean, just look at the characteristics of both Ninten and Ness. Anna compared to Paula, Lloyd to Jeff, and a few others as well, why not? All have similar lifestyles, abilities, and roles in their respective stories. Gearing up for a new round of research, I set out to compare Gygas and Porky's motives, actions, personality, and abilities. What I realize now is actually still pretty shocking to me, but it is uncanny how many similarities exist between the two characters. Both appear as final bosses behind a protective glass bubble. Porky even does so not only in EarthBound but again in Mother 3. Both utilize inexplicable attacks you can't understand. Both have intended to destroy the universe at some point in the plots of all the games. But most importantly, they both exhibit mixed feelings about their arch nemesis. For Gygus, it was Ninten. For Porky, it was his reincarnation Ness. Both wish for a friendship with them, while also angrily taunting them in the same conversation. There's just one final sticking point I can see all of you out there bringing up. But hey now, if characters like Ness or Paula inherited their Psi and PK powers from, say, Ninten and Anna, then how could Porky possibly have reincarnated from Gygus even though he has no Psi powers at all? And Gygus had the most powerful Psi arguably of any character in the entire series back in Mother 1. So I suppose now I'll have to go all the way back and try to unravel the secrets of Psi powers. No sweat, am I right? Fortunately, I actually think I might be up to the task. So in Mother 1, we know the alien species abducted Ninten's grandfather, George, and grandmother, Maria. We're given an explanation that George somehow managed to escape, and when he got back began studying something in solitude, ominously. Fast forwarding things to the end, and we know that George actually stole the secrets of Psi, escaped the aliens, and seems to have utilized those secrets to create humans with Psi powers of their own, which can explain his own grandchild, Ninten, and several other Psi-sensitive children around the area. This alien species then tasked their best warrior, which is of course Gygus, to lead an army to destroy Earth and stop anyone other than them from developing Psi powers. There is one major problem I didn't quite understand. If these secrets were so important, then why did they randomly abduct George and Maria and involve them by having them raise Gygus as a baby? It seems so strange, unless they required human parents to perform this experiment somehow. Perhaps they came up with a perfect formula to create an infant with extreme psionic and psychokinetic powers, but maybe needed this one peculiar ingredient: tender motherly love, to truly perfect their recipe. This sounds so crazy, right? Well, would you believe me if I told you there's some pretty solid evidence for what I am claiming? Although they are trying to stop humans from getting Psi powers, they are revealed to not be destroying humans for the most part. In fact, they seem to be especially targeting the parents of other known Psi-sensitive children, such as Anna's mother, plus the parents from Youngtown. But why not just destroy them? We know from searching the spaceship that they are apparently being warehoused for some purpose. Perhaps it's because they could be used to raise more members of their species with Psi powers? I'm going to fast forward to Mother 3 for a bit here, because I want to go over how this ties to EarthBound in detail in a minute. But in Mother 3, Lucas initially can't seem to develop any Psi powers until he gets some help from one of the Magypsies, Ionia. The Magypsies are strongly implied to be living personifications of the 8 melodies of the previous universes, so it seems they hold the same mother-child connection that the original 8 melodies had. In Lucas's case, Inoa provided enough loving care for him in order to develop powerful Psi powers, but since for Lucas the loss of his mother was so hard on him, he lost this attachment to his power for a period of time. Now, it's from Lucas that I want to start to build my theory around what I think happened at the end of the first game. The most powerful Psi ability in the entire series is undoubtedly PK Love. This granted Lucas or Klaus the ability to recreate the entire world in Mother 3. The secrets behind this particular PK ability aren't really known to any detail, but it can be surmised that the power comes from an extremely loving mother, and even then may need extraordinary circumstances to manifest in a user. Therefore, the original PK Love user was most likely Gygus or Geek from the original mother. He was hell-bent on accomplishing his goal of defeating the humans on Earth and safeguarding the secrets of Psi. When Ninten and his party gathered the 8 melodies of the lullaby Maria used to sing to him as a baby, Maria! No, not you. To their astonishment, singing the lullaby actually worked, as George predicted. The extremely powerful alien stopped resisting and ceased his attack at this vital moment, sparing the planet in honor of his adoptive mother. In lieu of this incredibly loving act, it's here that I believe Gygus absorbed the power of the 8 melodies itself. It was at this moment that Gygus was granted the very same power we see Lucas use to recreate the universe at the end of Mother 3. Albeit this power likely came in a different form. As he realized he had been infused with this new power sometime after takeoff, He endeavored to restart the world he knew once more, and recreate it with everyone back in it. Now thinking back to the boy he wished he could have known, Ninten, it was his fervent wish that he be reincarnated not only as a human this time, but that he would be Ninten's next-door neighbor in the next alternate world he would create. This time he believed he could escape his fate as Ninten's ultimate enemy. But as we all know, old habits die hard. To make matters worse, as Porky, Gygas's old psi powers would fail to manifest due to the horrible way he was raised. Especially due to his mother showing absolutely no affection to him whatsoever. Now, to preface what I'll talk about next, I'd like to cover a piece of evidence I think is interesting. Do you remember there's a seemingly innocuous location just outside Onnet called Beak Point, where Ness may purchase a broken down house for $7,500? There is apparently an odd magazine turned to Chapter 3 in which a man gets caught speeding. He attempts to get out of it by apparently lying to the officer about his wife's pregnancy. The lies escalate and he next claims the baby is in fact a demon. There was once a common belief that this was a reference to a magazine Mr. Itoi once wrote in real life. It appears as though this story about a demon child never existed within the magazine, bringing the supposed reference in doubt. Now it may sound silly, but picture this. What if this home was the original home of the Minch family? Perhaps Mr. Minch originally worked as some kind of writer for a magazine and he was the source of this odd article. Maybe he based this somewhat around their own lives. Perhaps they could always sense Porky's ominous presence and how much odd potential he had. Potential that was ultimately never realized due to his uncaring mother. But think a little more darker. What if one day that potential suddenly lashed out in a destructive manner and destroyed this little house by the ocean? To Porky, his lost psi powers were trying to merge again with him, and his mother was preventing this from happening. Maybe what Porky did next was to tinker away until a suitable vessel could be found from which he could channel his powers. He eventually created his first invention, the Mani Mani statue, which housed his powerful psionic essence which could be contained and used. Albeit it would still take him time to learn how to use it in this form, and he could most likely only use a small fraction of its power through this unnatural means. Burying it in the hills near his new home where he made a new friend, his life began progressing smoothly. No one seemed to understand him other than his new friend and neighbor Ness. One night that all changed. He could sense from the statue that a great prophecy regarding the fate of himself would soon be arriving. As he heard the crash outdoors, he raced out. He was faster than everyone, including Ness. To Ness, this was all extremely odd. The first person he saw other than the authorities was his cowardly but friendly neighbor, Porky, who had even asked his own brother to remain home while he checked out the dangerous meteorite. Porky, not wanting Ness to interfere, quickly made up a reason for Ness to go home. It was what happened next that becomes the decisive moment in the two boys' friendship. Ness receives a knock much later at the door, only to realize it is Porky again. Earlier, Porky had managed to visit the meteorite, could find no sense of any prophecy. All he got was an overwhelming feeling that he had to involve Ness somehow. Taking his brother Picky with him, Porky ultimately ends up using him as a pawn. For the first time, Porky concentrates his thoughts using the buried Mani Mani statue nearby and places Picky in a trance, staring off in the general direction of the statue. Once at Ness's house, Porky explains that they have to find Picky. To Ness, this is all beyond strange, of course. First, the normally timid Porky had told Picky he had to stay home while he went to a dangerous location. Now this? Ness would prepare to leave while feeling in his mind that as Porky sat there on the sofa, this would be the final time he could ever consider Porky his friend. A moment that would later be etched in his mind in Magicon. As they approached, Ness found that little by little, animals began to get hostile while Porky was less than helpful, leading him to wonder just how this boy safely got up here in the first place. It was even odder that Picky fell asleep in such a dangerous and exciting place. As they begin leaving, Porky, straining to hear, naturally becomes the first to detect Buzz, who has arrived with the prophecy. But what he hears next can only shock and horrify him. Firstly, realizing that he is in fact this universal cosmic destroyer, and that his own friend Ness is who the prophecy is referring to as his ultimate enemy, quickly fills him with extreme anxiety at this point. Attempting not to show this on the surface, Porky, realizing how awkward this is, can only remark that he hopes he's not one of the boys in the prophecy. because he's not into this sort of thing. Porky is also now focused on the possibility of stopping this prophecy from being set in motion, and he knows he cannot allow Ness to get a hold of the rock he must shatter. But upon arriving home, his father quickly chases him and his brother into another room for punishment, while his mother unwittingly sets the entire prophecy in motion when she swats Porky's one source of the Apple of Enlightenment, killing him. And worse yet, leading Ness to obtain the Sound Stone to collect a new 8 melodies that will allow him to channel his own power through the ultimate mother, the Earth itself. So how's that story? I really love this theory. It's wonderful in so many ways. When you think about it, everything regarding Porky's mother has come full circle, hasn't it? She first doomed him, leaving him unable to access his psi power. Now she has unwittingly set the prophecy in motion that will also destroy her own son. Realizing the next day Ness had left to begin his journey, Porky could only command his troops from the Mani Mani statue to guard Ness's sanctuary locations, and keep him from powering up to a point where he would be nearly unstoppable for Porky in his current form. Porky shadows Ness throughout the entire journey. Though childish early on when he creates a cult worshipping the color blue, the favorite color he wears on his overalls, he starts to become less innocent of the world while he's on his own journey. Next, he makes a deal with Master Belch to block Ness in Threed, before moving on with a get-rich-quick scheme in Fourside. By now he is finally strong enough to try and trap Ness in an illusion that goes horribly awry when he suddenly feels himself lose virtually all psi power. Realizing his source of psi energy is destroyed, he can only retreat beyond Ness's reach. It's during the second half of the game after Fourside where the situation starts to get increasingly desperate for Porky. While closely monitoring the situation, he is horrified to see that not only has Ness added 3 more of his sanctuary locations, he also has 1 more friend with him, bringing the total to 3 boys and 1 girl to match the prophecy. Ness has reached the deep darkness. And after chilling in my favorite spot ever to receive a pizza delivery, yo, I thought I told you to hold the leeches. Ness and the party finally discover Porky's downed helicopter, though he has evidently stripped it of parts. What is his plan now? It should be noted now that the 2 psychedelic trips Ness receives are vitally important to this entire theory. You see, we know that the messenger of these is actually none other than Mystery Toy himself. I believe there is a bit of a riddle here that actually points to Porky being literally the true enemy that Ness is battling. But he needs this to play out in his mind first before he can accept that. In the first message, Ness gets a retelling of his adventures so far. The only people mentioned are Ness, his party members, and Porky. For the later tea break that happens in Tenda Village, well, if you pay attention, notice something different? Well, this message mentions only 1 more character, Gygus. But this description of Gygus' current state? Look at it. Gygus is growing frightened of Ness and he's searching for ways to end his journey? Gygus is also out there suffering hardship as well? Wow, this explanation always confused me for the longest time playing this game. Like, what is this even talking about? Gygus isn't anywhere to be seen in the present day, and he only had the statue to spread his influence on Earth. But now it's really quite simple. The description of Gygus literally matches Porky for this stage of the game. It's him who's frightened since he won't confront Ness directly. He is also searching around for ways to stop Ness. No doubt the going is much harder now without any psi powers. We even have a very clever rhetorical question right at the end for Ness. Do you know where Porky went? It's as if the narrator is saying, come on, you know the truth, right? This all comes to a head when Ness gains enough power to form his own Magicant. It has some similarities with Maria's from the first game. The deeper down you go into it, the further into the subconscious you go. And in both cases, conquering the deepest regret solves the puzzle, allowing escape. In Queen Mary's case, at the deepest point was almost certainly her husband George. Again, I'm diving into theory land. But my best guess was that Maria did not want to escape captivity and leave behind her adopted son. They may have had several fights and arguments over this, until George gave Maria an ultimatum of either him or Geeg. And Maria chose to forget about him completely, leaving George to escape on his own. It's really only a hunch. But from both the Forgotten Man's statement that Ninten has a girl waiting for him, thus he's not forgotten, this seems to be a sticking point for how he was forgotten in the first place. Queen Mary's final words about him before Magicant vanishes seem to at least imply something happened along these lines.
But in Ness's case, the most significant psychological struggle he faces is coming to grips with the fact that his very first friend is actually his ultimate enemy. Remembering this part from playing it earlier in my life, Porky's appearance always struck me as odd. So we see a lineup of different kids Ness knows as if they're each waiting for a turn at something just before reaching Porky, who in this appearance here is still a kind and thoughtful person that apparently looks up to Ness very well. But this is merely the version of Porky that Ness feels most comfortable with. When we get deeper down into Ness's subconscious, we come into contact with the real Porky. The one Ness knows to be the true Porky but has suppressed it in order to keep his innocent outlook on life intact. He has tried so hard to keep his line of friendship open with the first friend he ever made, but now faces the dark reality that he must not only cut ties with him but also destroy him and end his plans to annihilate everyone and everything. The lineup of kids shows us that Ness has symbolically kept everyone waiting in line by choosing to uphold his high-maintenance friendship with Porky. By finally confronting and defeating the evil representation of Porky's thoughts in the form of the statue once more, allows Ness to finally fulfill the prophecy. In this instance, with Ness at his full power, Gygus, or Porky as he's known in this life, stands virtually no chance against Ness. Ness had already been given the power of Psi Power by his mother's encouragement earlier, which is shown in a short cutscene when arriving in Magicant. A nice little hint here that shows us that Ness first started to manifest his own Psi powers when his mother showed encouragement. But after Magicant, he now has the power of the Ultimate Mother, the Earth itself, added to his power. Now for the part you've been waiting for, the final act of EarthBound. When it comes to Porky accessing the Cave of the Past, I should cover the how first, since it's still a sticking point for a lot of people. Porky has clearly developed some serious tinkering skills of his own already by this point. So despite the fact he only stole the Phase Distorter Mark I, which can only move within space and not time, he would have to perform the same upgrades Apple Kid and Dr. Andonuts made to create the Phase Distorter Mark III, which allows it to move in time, and he may have also given it the healing properties of the Mark II, but we can't be sure. I believe from the downed helicopter that he may have been scavenging parts just for this purpose. He has also scavenged the Mark I completely, stripping it for parts. So I'm actually inclined to believe that the spider battle mech he is piloting was built from the parts, and actually doubles as a phase distorter since he uses it to escape to another dimension at the end of the battle. It looks to me like he may still have gotten help though. He did kidnap one Mr. Saturn and also left behind a Horn of Life in the wreckage. It's actually a very real possibility he got help from this one Mr. Saturn. Apple Kid actually credits the Mr. Saturn for helping them with the phase distorter. So it's at least possible this one helped Porky. The Cave of the Past is an area crawling with Porky's best troops, trying desperately to slow down Ness and his party from accomplishing their goals. So now, the analysis you've been waiting for. So much has been said over the years about this battle and what it could mean. For me in this theory video, Porky actually fled to the past in order to change history. He wanted to alter the circumstances of his own birth and be properly reborn as Gygus. The key to this theory? Well, Andonuts. He mentions that Gygus is attacking right here from the past, right? That can be the only explanation for this odd statement. Yes, you heard me. If you believe the fetus was either the original Gygus or Ness, you would have to be wrong. Because the fetus is actually Porky. But maybe you still need another hint. I don't know about you, but I find it difficult to associate this creepy, cold place with either Maria or Ness's mother. But doesn't it represent the neglectful and uncaring Lardna Minch so unbelievably well? Symbolically, this place represents the empty and hollow feeling between Porky and his mother so perfectly. Next, I'll explain the supposed face of what appears to be Ness, though some think it could be Ninten as well. Some think it's merely Ness's reflection. This is a rather interesting idea. Kind of reminds me of the cover of EarthBound with Ness's face reflecting off the final Starman's visor. But there's actually a problem with this since Ness is a robot now and doesn't look like that anymore.
I want to make a transition here and actually talk about the Apple of Enlightenment. There is some context that is lost in translation. In the English version, the nature of the Apple of Enlightenment is unclear. Some have speculated that it was a message written by the future Apple Kid. What is interesting about this theory is it explains why the prophecy makes reference to Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh, but fails to mention Porky at all since Apple Kid never met Porky. But in the original, the Apple of Enlightenment is definitively understood to be a machine that generates prophecies. So I'd like to introduce you to the theory that we may actually already be looking at the Apple of Enlightenment in the form of the Devil's Machine. Yes, I know I need to explain the how and why. Well, my first thought was the face that seems to appear within it was reacting to the fact that Ness approached it. Maybe it was the Apple of Enlightenment's way of reacting to the Chosen One as he approached? But wait, you say, how could this be the Apple of Enlightenment? It contains Gygas's consciousness. Well, I'll take you back to Forside for a moment. I'll remind you that the Mani Mani statue was originally named the Mani Mani Devil. Giving us a hint, both contain the same evil at different points. So here's what I think happened. Careful monitoring of Ness and watching him experience victory after victory had left Porky with almost no hope of defeating him. Until scouting of the Lost Underworld revealed that the Apple of Enlightenment machine, the one Buzz had obtained the prophecy from in an alternate future timeline, was located within the nearby Cliff That Time Forgot. As Ness and his party were busy securing the final sanctuary location, it was then that Porky put his plan into motion, stealing the components he needed from Andonuts and the Mr. Saturn, while also roadblocking the path to the meteor Ness would need with fresh troops from the future. Though he knows the Apple of Enlightenment was there beyond the cliff in the present, it would not work now that the prophecy was already set in motion, so he would need to go all the way back to the source, literally altering the machine itself before it ever created the prophecy. Though he was successful in reaching the machine, he also got there only to realize he had no knowledge of how to change it, until it dawned on him that he could insert his own consciousness into the machine and bend it to his will, warping reality itself and giving him more power and knowledge than ever before, including even the ability to change the nature of complex happenings. Most important to him, the circumstances of his birth. So the true reason for his color change was actually because he was halfway to changing history itself and becoming the true Gygas once more. Hence how, in Andonut's words, he was attacking from the past. However, performing this feat comes with severe side effects. Very severe side effects. You see, upon merging with this machine, Porky went from being rather innocent to being cursed with vast knowledge about the entire universe, including every dark impulse and every horrible thing ever done in history. He also found out about the true nature of his own parents. He knows now that his mother doesn't care about him at all, and that Ness is now done being friends with him forever. To put it bluntly, the Apple of Enlightenment seems to be a reference to the forbidden fruit of knowledge from biblical traditions. I also realize now at this point that there's a strong Tale of Two Cities motif going on. Every step of the way, Ness and Porky are always so close to each other and yet so far away at the same time. Ness going through a similar process of gaining increased power at the exact same time Porky was doing so, only moving in the opposite direction. Ness feeling the power of love stronger than ever before, while Porky moved in a far darker direction. We can see some hints that the Cave of the Past is actually Porky's opposite version to Ness's Magicant. One hint I see is that in Magicant, the embodied Porky was kind and gentle, while in the Cave of the Past he's threatening and belligerent. This is reversed with the two machines representing Gygas. It threatens and attacks him in the Sea of Eden, while in the final battle it's in pain, and even calling out to Ness for help. The amazing thing about Porky is that once going completely insane, his mind has lost all grip of reality. In a moment of pure Shakespearean irony, he even calls the confused Gygas an almighty idiot, unaware that he is in fact the real Gygas. We can finally fit everything together in such a way as to match Mr. Itoi's original concept of this battle. So Mr. Itoi based this around a scene from the film The Military Policeman and the Dismembered Beauty, in which he mistook a murder scene for a rape. As you now know, we are battling Porky's mind here, making it very easy to see how Gygas actually knows Ness, but also these disturbing and undiscernible attacks that your party does not understand are actually the dark things Porky now knows about the world. Luckily, the party manages to defeat the out-of-control entity, foiling Porky's attempt to change the past and instead reverting him back to normal and forcing him into a universe-hopping retreat for the time being. I have a lot I would like to say about Mother 3, but this video may already be getting long enough as it is, so I'll just mention Porky traveled repeatedly through time, trying to find a universe with internal logic to it so that he could use it to his advantage. He eventually found the Nowhere Islands, but also trying to carry out his original goal of destroying the world and ridding it of any psi-using humans. Albeit this time he will try to prevent another universe from even reforming. Only I believe the way he was defeated by being locked in the absolutely safe capsule indicates to me his obsession with finding some form of maternal protection. But anyway, despite how much I love this series, I also have to agree with Mystery Toy on one final thing. That the series is truly over. How do we know this? Because even if the characters are in fact reincarnating forever, Porky, who was once Gygus, can never do that again since he's kept completely safe from the destruction of every universe. So the ultimate hero was... you, Dr. Andonuts. No, take credit, Doc. I don't know how you pulled it off, but with the power of donuts, I suppose anything's possible.
Huh? Donuts. Is there anything they can't do?
Dad, you're a hero.
So that'll be about it this time. I think I've said all I wanted to say. Thanks for watching. And again, have a happy Mother's Day.